So the first presenter is Wu Dao, as mentioned. So Wu Dao is a senior DevOps engineer at Access Group, Vietnam, and he also a very close contributor of some of the open source projects and also a contributor, active contributor in Community Builders program. As I said, he spoke at a couple of AWS Summit ASEAN also, which is amazing. And then today he's going to talk about multi-tenancy in AWS cluster, EKS cluster using vCluster. So without taking much time, Udao, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I will share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see my screen now? The slide?
Yeah, we can see the screen. Awesome.
Okay.
Over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vũ Đào from Vietnam, and I'm a senior DevOps engineer at the Asset Group. I'm also a third-year AWS community builder, and I'm delighted to have you here today to learn about multi-tenancy in EKS cluster using vCluster. Why should we consider using vCluster? Our requirement is to establish multiple environments for developers to facilitate development testing as well as performing regression and performance tests. And the crucial aspect is ensuring that these environments closely mimic the structure of staging and production environments, which are based on Kubernetes. Instead of relying on Kubernetes namespace to create the environments, we opt to offer developers a solution that provides them with an environment that closely resembles a real Kubernetes cluster. This is where vCluster comes into play. Okay, vCluster is an open source project developed by Love Labs, and it provides a feature to create cluster within a cluster we call the host. And the vCluster fully Kubernetes compliant. Here is how the vCluster operates. In practice, vCluster utilizes namespace at the host view. But when viewed from vCluster, it behaves like a real Kubernetes cluster. It achieves this by employing the syncer that synchronizes resources between the host and the vCluster. This makes it more easy to understand how vCluster functions. When a developer deploys an application to the vCluster, it creates pods, and then these pods are synchronized to the host within the vCluster namespace. That is general overview of the vCluster and how it works. Now we move to the demo. Do you see my new screen, the visual code? Okay.
Yeah, we can see
Before I
that.
go to the demo, let's look at the architect overview. In this demo, I will create a 2 vCluster in EKS cluster, and with the necessary resources such as application load balancer for the web application and the network load balancer to expose the vCluster for remotely access. In the vCluster, I created 2 projects here, Echo project and the guestbook project. And each project, I will create in Glassvoid to expose the application for accessing from the website. And to create the resources from in the AWS, I leverage the EKS blueprints. EKS blueprints have to bootstrap an EKS cluster with the with the necessary add-ons such as VPC CNI, Magic Server, AWS Load Balancer Controller, EPSCSI driver, and Carpenter. Carpenter is used to provide the node for our application, but which is used to deploy the Carpenter. Here I use the Fargate to deploy the carpenter, and the other box will use the carpenter node. Okay, so let's check. I list the CDK stack here, and you see all the stack here, and I will deploy. I deploy all the stack with the concurrency and disable the required approval in my profile. I already create this stack because the EKS cluster takes time to create. And here we can use this command line to update the Kubernetes config so we can access to the EKS cluster. Here is the component of my cluster. It includes the Fargate and the carpenter node here and all the ports. Okay, now I'm going to create the vCluster. To create a vCluster, I use this script. This script will generate the YAML file that is the vCluster values, and I enable sync some components such as persistent volume, storage class, nodes, service accounts, and ingress. Besides the default sync such as port, secret, config maps, and more. This one is not enabled as default, so I just enable it as I want an accessory. And I use this domain to expose the vCluster later. So I run it. I create the vCluster app1 and create the vCluster app2 either. Let's check the port in the namespace app1. You will see it is creating, and in the namespace it is in pending state and is waiting for the carpenter to provision new node for it. The vCluster app1 is ready. Let's check the node to see it provide the new node here. Now I will create the service with the load balancer type, leverage the network load balancer to expose the vCluster. This service will forward the request to the vCluster backend here. I will describe it. You can see the label of the vCluster. It is the sensor one and handle the traffic to the vCluster. So I will create the service inside the host. And the app2. It creates the network load balancer for us here. So let's look back this. we create the vcluster with register this domain for expose the vcluster. Now we need to point this domain to the DNS of the load balancer here, the network load balancer. And I use this script to handle that. This script will create the record JSON to create the CNAME record for my domain. Similar to the app2, I have the load balancer here, and I will create the let's check the load balancer here. Here is my domain, and refresh to see it create the domain app1 EKS and app2 EKS and point to the network load balancer DNS here. Now we will expose. I will expose the expose the Kubernetes config of the vcluster so that we can remotely access the vcluster. I will use the command vcluster connect app1 within the names by app1, and the server is the domain of the vcluster, and generate the Kubernetes config.yaml. You can see here. I alias this command point to the Kubernetes config, and now I just move the Kubernetes config to that. And similar for the app2. You will see it will generate a new one. Okay, now we will check the resource in the vcluster app1. It's a bit late. Maybe it needs to wait a little bit for the domain result the DNS because I just created. Let's see. Now we can check the vcluster in app1, and let's wait for the app2, and it's now ready. So now I will create the application on the vcluster. Here I will create the two projects, the Echo project with the deployment here, and the service with notebook type to expose the application, and the guestbook project. It is include the Redis leader and the Redis follower as a standby, and the deployment front end with the service as the notebook to expose the application. I will deploy those manifest in the vcluster. It also create the ingress here. The application is being deployed, and there's some pending as it's waiting for the carpenter to provision new node to serve the service. You hear it provide two new ones. Okay, let's check the ingress. There are two ingress in the vCluster, and it also sync to the host here. It will sync with the format, with the name of the resource and the namespace inside the vCluster and the namespace of the vCluster in the host. The ingress is defined here. It will include the certificate for the HTTPS, the listener rule, and the backend service. And the guestbook ingress is similar, but I define its service at the default backend and without the listener rule. So I will point this ALB DNS to my web application, to my domain. I still use this script. And app2 either. And let's check the resource here. It will it create the website here, point to the DNS and as well as the app2. And we can check some resource like the instances, the Kubernetes nodes, and the load balancer here. We will have 4 load balancer, 2 network load balancer for expose the vCluster and the application load balancer for our web application. So now we will check the website, the guestbook here, and the Echo project will show here. And I will check the app2 and the app2 with the Echo. Here is the app2, and let's put some data to the Redis here. Hello app2. And for this one, I refresh and hello app1. You will see the 2 vCluster is separate and isolation with its own resource. Now we successfully to create the 2 vCluster with the application inside. It's similar to our environment that want to develop the project. After we have the vCluster, we can create the multiple vCluster for our development, and then we add those vCluster to the Argo CD and set up the CI/CD for it. Here, I add the vCluster of the dev1, dev2, and multiple here, and then developer just create the application there to deploy using the CI/CD leveraged by the Argo CD. So my present is in here. So do you have any questions?
So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat. So Buddha will be able to answer those even after this session. Buddha, if you don't mind, can you share your feedback form again as well, the slide?
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have any feedback for Buddha, please scan